She was constructing her cabin log by log, completely unaware that the cowboy observing her from afar was a widower yearning for a family of his own. In the Montana Territory, during a late afternoon in early November 1881, snow dusted the branches of pine and spruce trees, creating a serene blanket over the clearing that only the untamed wilderness could provide. The frame of a modest cabin rose partially complete, its rough log walls sturdy despite their unfinished state. A gentle breeze slipped through the cracks in the wood, carrying the aroma of fresh pine resin and the chill of impending winter. "Miss, I figured this spot was deserted, but I can see that's not the case." The voice emerged from the tree line, deep and steady, with a subtle drawl that hinted at years spent in the company of horses and solitude. Eleanor Sullivan straightened up gradually, one hand supporting her lower back, while the other clutched her hammer. She turned to spot a man on horseback gazing at her from the edge of the clearing, his bay gelding shifting restlessly on the frosty earth. Eleanor's pulse quickened. She hadn't encountered another person in more than a week, not since the Kowalskis delivered a bag of flour along with a caution about early snowfall. Her eyes sharpened. "This is my land. If you're off course, head west. There's no place for you here." The man tipped his hat politely. "I don't mean any harm, ma'am. I'm just patrolling the edge of my family's ranch. I'm Clayton Hartwell, from the Circle H, about 10 miles north." He paused, his gaze shifting from the incomplete cabin to her worn gloves. "Didn't anticipate finding anyone out here building solo." Eleanor's expression remained firm. "That's how I like it." Clayton swung down from his horse with effortless grace. He guided the animal a bit closer, but maintained a courteous gap, his boots crunching softly on the frozen grass. "No disrespect intended, ma'am. It's just that most ladies don't tackle this sort of labor." He eyed the wall structure, then her rounded belly. "Especially not in your situation. I didn't come out here to blend in with most ladies." Eleanor raised the hammer once more, driving a nail with precise, steady blows. Her breath formed misty clouds in the crisp air. "I came to begin anew." Clayton observed her for a few seconds longer before stepping back, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "All right then. I just figured you might appreciate some assistance with the heavier stuff. Balancing a child and a cabin build shows real determination. I've got plenty of that. What I lack is patience for handouts." She turned away, hoisting another log into position. Her motions were more labored now, weighed down by the growing child within her. But she held steady. "So if that's pity you're offering, save it for the Circle H." Clayton regarded her thoughtfully. There was defiance in her stance, sure, but also a hidden exhaustion beneath her pride. He didn't view her as fragile. He saw a woman piecing her world together through sheer resolve. "Not pity," he said at last. "Just admiration." Eleanor stayed silent at first, hammering until the log was secure. Then she met his eyes, really met them. He carried himself like someone from a privileged background, yet the creases around his eyes told of hardship. His attire was neat, but his hands bore the marks of hard work. And in his face, there was a hint of something she hadn't encountered in ages, genuine empathy. "I've had my fill of folks trying to mend my life," she replied, her tone gentler. "I'm not shattered, I'm just constructing." Clayton nodded. "I get it." He climbed back onto his horse, but paused before heading into the aspens. "If you reconsider, ma'am, if you need a hand, the Circle H isn't too distant." Eleanor didn't reply. She watched him ride away, vanishing among the trees. Only after he was out of sight did she rest against the partial wall and let out a deep breath. The baby inside her moved, a gentle flutter deep in her abdomen. She placed a hand there, her gaze lingering on the spot where he disappeared. That's not the sort of man who shows up by chance, she whispered to herself. And though she'd never say it out loud, something in her stirred as well. Not fear, but something scarier, hope. 3 days passed. The morning sun sat low, stretching long shadows over the icy prairie. Eleanor positioned herself at the base of her incomplete cabin, a rough, hewn pine plank balanced awkwardly on her shoulder. Her back ached with every inhale, her fingers numb from the chill and constant effort. The baby had dropped lower in recent days, adding an extra burden that turned every chore into an ordeal. Yet she persisted. She had to. She'd pounded in the foundation posts herself, dragged each log from the forest, using only a loaned cart and her own tenacity. Her supplies were neatly stored in the root cellar, and her chimney now drew smoke efficiently. But the walls remained unfinished, and the snow hinted at tougher times ahead. She lowered the plank with a groan, her breath hitching as a sharp pain shot through her side. "You're overdoing it." The familiar, resonant voice startled her. She whirled around, heart racing, to see Clayton Hartwell at the clearing's edge. Beside his bay gelding, he held a cloth-wrapped package in his arms. He appeared more casual today, no vest or gloves, just a wool coat and eyes that seemed to see right through her. Eleanor gripped her hammer tighter. "I didn't invite company." "No," he said softly, "but I decided to drop by regardless." He approached slowly and set the bundle on a nearby stump. "My mother sent this, tea for queasiness and some knitted baby outfits. She figured you'd act like you didn't need them, but to send them anyhow." Eleanor eyed the package without budging. Clayton glanced at her cabin walls. "It's shaping up well. You've handled all this on your own." She nodded curtly. "Every single nail. Impressive." He looked at her belly, then her hands. "Tough on you, though, I'd bet." Eleanor crossed her arms, guarding against the cold and an unwelcome warmth she resisted. "What's the real reason you're here, Mr. Hartwell? Slumming it or collecting tales for your mother?" Clayton's eyes held steady. "I'm here because I chose to be, and because I hate the idea of you struggling through this pain by yourself when you don't have to. I'm not a charity project. I never claimed you were." She stepped closer, her voice strained. "You don't know me. You have no idea what I've endured. Men like you dangle help like a gift, but there's always a catch, expectations, criticism." He let her words linger in the frosty air without interrupting. Then, quietly, "Some folks offer aid not because they see weakness, but because they respect your resilience." Eleanor blinked, thrown off balance. Clayton went on, his tone softer. "I've watched people crumble under far less than what you're handling. But you're out here creating something solid, with no audience, no praise. That's not frailty, that's exceptional." She swallowed, her throat parched. "I won't linger," he added, nodding toward the bundle. "Just thought the tea might help, and maybe a nudge that not everyone who appears wants to control or repair you." Eleanor glanced at the package, then at him. The sincerity in his words rattled her more than any charm could. He was genuine. "You can leave it," she said eventually. He nodded, turned, and headed back to his horse. She watched him depart, her heartbeat echoing louder than the breeze. Once he was gone, she exhaled deeply and approached the stump, unwrapping the cloth. Inside were 3 small knitted pieces in soft yellow wool, crafted with care, and a tin of tea that carried a faint ginger and mint scent. For the first time since arriving in Montana, a crack formed in her resolve, not enough to shatter her, just enough to let emotion seep through. A week later, the wind picked up once more, whistling through the gaps in the unfinished cabin walls, shaking loose nails like rattling bones. Eleanor sat near the hearth. What would become one marked by stones outlining its future shape. Her hands were chafed from woodwork, her breath visible in the chilly interior. Clayton knelt opposite her, adding another log to the growing pile. They'd labored together all morning. No grand statements, no extra chatter, just the steady beat of hammers and the occasional breathless chuckle when a plank stubbornly splintered. He passed her the canteen. She accepted it without pause. "You're twice as tough as anyone I know," he remarked, brushing sawdust from his arms. "I had no choice," she replied, gazing into the flickering embers of their fragile fire. "I couldn't afford to wait for rescue." He settled beside her, drawing his coat closer. She avoided his eyes as she spoke next. "I was wed in Boston. A formal affair with ivory gloves, roses, the works. He walked out 6 months in, claiming the child wasn't his." Clayton turned his head gradually, his expression neutral. "I never corrected him," Eleanor went on. "That the baby was his, that the timing matched. What was the use? He left before I could even explain." The quiet stretched between them. She sighed. "The divorce never went through completely. Legally, I'm still bound to him." Clayton was silent for a while. "That's a heavy load." Eleanor's eyes dropped to the floorboards. "It's not something I advertise. Out here, folks already view me as flawed. Adding still married doesn't help." Clayton nodded quietly. "People rush to judge what they can't comprehend." She glanced at him sideways. "You haven't asked if I still care for him." "No," he said gently. "If you did, you wouldn't be here." She blinked once, then again, her throat constricted suddenly. "What about you?" she asked, her voice just above the wind. "You don't seem like the type who wanders solo purely for tranquility." He stared toward the snowy hills. "Her name was Sarah, my wife. We tied the knot young, maybe too young. She loved racing horses. One morning, she pushed a gelding too hard and broke her neck on the ridge by our ranch." Eleanor's heart froze. "I found her. I was 28. That was 5 years back. Since then, I ride, repair fences, keep to myself. Not out of fear of loving again. Just didn't see the reason." She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." Too," he said, "but I'm still standing. And so are you." The wind wailed outside as snow swirled across the open doorway. They continued working a few more hours. He shaped roof beams while she cut door pieces. Their actions sensed naturally unspoken, as if voicing it might shatter the moment. As the sun sank behind the mountains, painting the valley in deep purple shadows, they rested on the partial porch. Eleanor bundled her shawl around her belly, her gloved hands shaking from fatigue. Clayton offered his coat. She declined. But after a pause, she murmured, "It's easier to handle everything solo, but maybe it's just more isolating." Clayton looked at her, not with sympathy or ownership, but with something solid and warm. "Perhaps," he said, and for once, the breeze through the walls felt gentle, as if choosing not to drive them apart. In late autumn, the wind swept through the valley, carrying murmurs. By the time frost coated the tall grasses around Eleanor's cabin, the breeze brought more than chill. It brought gossip, snippets of curiosity and disapproval that filtered into town with every traveler. Folks whispered about a woman isolated in the wild, too independent to take aid, too unyielding to conform. But mostly, they buzzed about the visits, about Clayton Hartwell, a well-regarded rancher's son, spotted too frequently heading south, lingering too long by an incomplete home, and a woman who wore her troubles like a shield. Eleanor caught the hints at Willowbrook's general store while bartering eggs for flour. The clerk's courteous grin was strained now. The Kowalskis, once warm, had turned guarded, their inquiries shorter. She feigned ignorance until one frigid morning, with the ground solid underfoot and the air crisp with secrets, an unfamiliar carriage pulled into her clearing. The woman who emerged carried herself like royalty. Her coat was fine imported wool, her gloves soft lambskin, her hair styled in an intricate updo suggesting help from maids and fine parlours. "Miss Sullivan," she said sharply, smoothing her skirt while appraising the simple porch. "I'm Victoria Morrison. I suspect you've heard of me, even if not directly." Eleanor stayed silent at first. She stood tall, her hand instinctively covering her growing belly. "I'm aware of you," she responded evenly. Victoria's eyes scanned the cabin, the dust, the raw walls, before fixing on Eleanor. "I'll keep this short. Whatever's going on between you and Mr. Hartwell must stop." Eleanor raised her chin. "There's nothing going on." Then cut off the connection. "He comes here often." Tongues wag. "His family's reputation is being tarnished in every gathering from Willowbrook outward." "I never invited him." "But you haven't turned him away, have you?" Victoria's smile was rigid. "You've allowed him to linger, to assist. And now my fiancé is delaying our wedding while the town speculates if he's raising another man's offspring." Eleanor's heart raced, but her voice remained composed. "He's his own man, Miss Morrison. I haven't lured him, and I don't want his status or wealth. No, just his focus, his hours, his good name." Victoria advanced. "You see me as cruel, blind to struggle, but I'm not. What I won't tolerate is a brewing disgrace, while honorable men suffer from misguided gallantry." Eleanor's nails bit into her palms. "I've erected this cabin single-handedly, chopped my own fuel, made garments for a child who lacks society's approval. I've sought nothing from your fiancé but decency. I've stayed out of sight." "Not sufficiently," Victoria retorted. "Your existence still lingers in his mind, and your quiet lets imaginations run wild." She inhaled, mist forming from her breath. "Leave. Sell this plot. Head east or fade into another place that'll accept someone in your position. But don't remain here, not where he can spot you, not where his prospects erode with each rumor." Eleanor felt heat flush her cheeks. "You don't control him." "But I understand society," Victoria said. "Men chase ideals, poetic notions of endurance in hardship, but they wed stability. They choose the uncomplicated road." She retreated. "Make it simpler for him, for everyone, before it worsens." As the carriage faded into the woods and quiet returned, Eleanor stood still. The cold pierced her shawl. Her breathing was uneven. Later, she'd tidy the porch, reorganize the wood Clayton had split the prior week. She'd brew tea and sense the baby's movements. But in that instant, she lingered on the porch, body sore and heart heavier than any beam she'd lifted. She gazed into the wilderness that had become her sanctuary. Then she murmured to the empty air, "Am I ruining the one decent man who ever saw me without condescension?" Early winter arrived with steady snowfall, muffling the land in white. The storm built gradually but persistently. Snow adorned the trees like delicate fabric, and chimney smoke rose quietly above Eleanor's cabin. She sat by the fire, fingers curled around a tin mug of tea that had cooled long ago. Days had elapsed since Victoria Morrison's confrontation, days since those cutting remarks had pierced her barriers and planted something more perilous than anxiety, uncertainty. Each gust through the trees made her tense for another clash, for Clayton to appear with resentment or letdown. But when he did arrive, he brought none of that. The sound of hooves reached her before the knock, purposeful, recognizable. She opened the door preemptively. Snowflakes tumbled from his shoulders and hat brim. His coat was powdered white, his face flushed from the freeze and determination. "Eleanor," he said steadily, "we need to talk." "You shouldn't be here," she replied, stepping aside. "I belong right here," he countered, entering. The flames danced across his face as he peeled off his gloves. His demeanor had shifted. No wavering, no courteous doubt, just firm intent. She positioned herself by the hearth, arms crossed over her belly, as if protecting both herself and the unborn from the inevitable. "I went home," he started, "and informed my father the engagement's broken. I won't wed Victoria Morrison. I won't be coerced into a false existence." Eleanor's breath snagged. "He was livid," Clayton continued plainly, "threatened to disown me, labeled me an idiot. But I stood my ground." "Clayton," she began, but he gestured to stop her. "I'm not sharing this to sway you. It's so you grasp this isn't about sympathy or defiance or fleeting romance." He drew nearer, his voice softening. "It's about embracing what's authentic. You, this spot, that little one. I've found more honesty in how you swing a hammer than in all the fancy talks of my past." Eleanor blinked, her throat constricting. "You can't squander your life on a controversy," she whispered. "I'm not squandering," he responded. "I'm creating fresh." A profound quiet enveloped them, broken only by the fire's soft pops. Eleanor faced the flames, her hands quivering. "There's something you don't know," she said faintly. "Something I owed you from the start." Clayton waited, his patience unwavering. "I'm not divorced," she confessed. "By law, I'm still wed to Charles Whitmore, the man who abandoned me when I revealed my pregnancy." Clayton's forehead creased, but he remained quiet. "I assumed it was done. I fled Boston with unfinished papers, expecting he'd complete them. But no confirmation came. I lacked the energy to pursue it. I just wanted to vanish." She faced him, eyes glistening with remorse and what resembled humiliation. "I'm no widow. I'm not unbound. I'm another's spouse, at least legally. You deserve the truth before wrecking your path for someone who can't reciprocate." The statement lingered like frost, piercing and clear. Clayton moved forward until he was right before her. Without pause, he took her hands, rough, worn hands that had forged a home from scratch. "You believe this alters my feelings?" he asked gently. She attempted to withdraw, but he held on, tender yet resolute. "It only strengthens my resolve to stand by you." Her breath faltered. "I've witnessed your trials. I recognize the toll, and I see you persisting, still forging ahead. That doesn't make you a liability, it makes you the bravest soul I've met." "I have nothing to give," she murmured. "No title, no clear path, just this quiet snow and an unborn child." "You've given truth," Clayton said. "Something genuine. That's more than I've had from anyone." She looked up at him then, truly. And what she saw wasn't compassion or benevolence. It was affection. The fire snapped behind them as the wind brushed the cabin. For the first time since fate turned harsh, the burden in Eleanor's chest eased. Not vanished, but divided. Clayton's grip stayed on her hand, as did his commitment. Deep winter brought stirring winds through the pines, with moonlight gleaming on the snow, blanketed clearing. The cabin endured like a resilient pulse in the wild, surrounded by stark trees and the far-off quiet of wolves. Inside, Eleanor Sullivan gripped the carved cradle's edge, her heart racing with an indefinable emotion. Not pure fear or joy, but a suspended breath. Clayton lingered by the hearth, his shadow reaching toward her like a silent pledge. "You shouldn't have returned," she said softly. He didn't budge. "You knew I would." Eleanor's gaze met his briefly before dropping. "Our feelings don't matter, Clayton. You realize that. We can't alter laws or erase opinions." "I'm not aiming to change the past," he replied. "I'm aiming to craft something honest." She rose suddenly, hands pressing her lower back as the baby shifted. The child kicked forcefully, mirroring her inner turmoil. "You think affection simplifies this?" she snapped. "It doesn't. Love doesn't hush rumors. It doesn't process legal separations. It doesn't acquire property or nurture a child or protect from a community eager for my downfall." "I don't care about the community," Clayton stated. "You ought to," she countered, voice unsteady. Because they'll care about you. The Circle H hair picking a wedded woman with an illegitimate child and a tainted history. Clayton's jaw clenched, but his tone stayed even. He's not illegitimate. He's yours, and that elevates him above many I've known. Eleanor felt the air escape her. She turned away, a hand steadying on the window frame, trembling. I've spent months questioning if I could manage solo, she whispered. Now, with someone offering to share the load, all I sense is terror. Clayton crossed the room quietly, stopping just behind her, his presence warm through the gap. Why terror? He inquired. Because I've loved once, she replied, voice faint. And I erred. I trusted promises that dissolved. I relied on a man to remain, and he fled without verifying the child's paternity. Clayton's voice was subdued. And you fear I'll repeat that? She didn't respond. He touched her shoulder lightly. Eleanor, he said, I know loss. The ground vanishing beneath you. My wife passed on an ordinary morning. She teased about my strong coffee one moment. The next, her horse bolted and she was gone. She turned gradually, face pained. I buried her under a cottonwood, he continued. Every day after, I've existed without expectations. I lost faith in destiny, happiness, everything. He cradled her face tenderly, reverently, until I entered your clearing and saw you hammering like the world owed you. A surprised laugh escaped her, part sob, part incredulity. You're not a stray I found, he went on. You're the spark I needed, and I refuse to forfeit it. Not for outdated laws, not for timid souls who never built their own lives. Eleanor's hands rose, grasping his wrists without repelling him. I don't know how to welcome you, she admitted softly. I've erected so many barriers, I've lost the entrance. He rested his forehead against hers, voice cracking. Then allow me to search with you. For an instant the world shrank to them. Snow beyond, heat within, a delicate strand of hope tightening. I lost my wife once, Clayton whispered, laced with recollection and fresh determination. I won't lose you too. Not now that I've discovered something worth holding. Eleanor shut her eyes. For the first time in years, solitude lifted. By late afternoon, the sky darkened to slate. Eleanor clutched the porch rail as a sharp wind rustled the pines anxiously. The baby had been active all morning, kicking low and intense, as if aware of the approaching change. Snow descended thick and rapid. Soon, everything blurred in white. Eleanor ignited all the lamps, prepared Lennon's heated water, her heart pounding with apprehension. Then a contraction struck like flames, robbing her air, bending her double. She grasped the table, eyes wide in agony. Not yet, she breathed. Not this way. She was isolated. Miles distant, Clayton Hartwell readied his sturdiest horse. The ominous sky urged him onward. Instinct overrode logic. He ventured into the blizzard, but it engulfed him. Sight vanished. His horse stumbled in a snowbank, hurling him into an icy stream. Cold shocked his breath away. Pain stabbed his shoulder. He lay there briefly, snow on his eyelids. She needs me, he muttered, hauling himself from the water. The horse had fled, so he trudged on foot through deep drifts and howling gusts, one laborious step after another. In the cabin, Eleanor battled, screaming, bleeding. Her body tore and blazed. She pleaded for fortitude, for her father, for relief. The tempest shook the walls. Then a raw, wondrous cry, her baby, a son. She wept, holding him close, kissing his damp skin, uttering every blessing she knew. But Clayton hadn't arrived, and the storm intensified. Dread gripped her. What if he was gone? What if she'd endured this only to lose the man who valued her as worthy of love? She cradled her son, tears silent. You'll be secure, she whispered. Even if it's only us. A faint knock, then stronger. She stiffened. The door creaked open. Clayton appeared, drenched in snow, blood staining his shirt, face ashen from hurt. "Clayton," she gasped. He staggered in, collapsing by the fire. Steam rose from his coat. His breaths were shallow. Then he noticed the infant. Their eyes locked. No words needed. He extended a shaking hand, grazing the tiny fist against her. "Looks like you've started a family already, Miss Sullivan," he whispered. "Room for one more." Her voice caught. She could have refused, perhaps should have, but instead she placed the baby in his arms. "Only if you're certain," she murmured. Never been more so. Outside, snow persisted. Inside, a fresh warmth bloomed, a home, a vow, a start neither had imagined. This time, Eleanor knew companionship had arrived. Spring's initial hint wasn't blossoms or thawing ice, but the softening soil under Eleanor's boots. Mud embraced her footsteps. Birds resumed their songs, and pine's fragrance warmed in the sun. Within the cabin, the fire still flickered, but joy also stemmed from the shared laughter of two who once knew only quiet. Eleanor ventured out with a pail, her newborn son nestled in a cloth sling against her. Clayton knelt close by, setting the first post for an expanding kitchen. "Soil's softening early," he called, looking up with a smile. She grinned in return. "Or perhaps it senses our tasks ahead." He rose. "We need space anyway, especially for our growing lad." They'd named him Thomas, simple, reliable. That afternoon, Eleanor sat at the table, penning a letter to a Boston legal firm, her formal divorce petition from Charles Whitmore. Her hand shook as she sealed it. Clayton came in, sawdust on his arm, sunlight in his expression. "You did it." She nodded. "Final tie to yesterday, closed and mailed." He kissed her brow. "I'm proud." They marked it without ceremony or clergy, just a meal with the Kowalskis and some locals. Eleanor prepared stew, Clayton strung lights. As dusk turned violet, he rose and clasped her hand. "She's the toughest woman I've met," he declared. "I thought I'd aid her, but she rescued me." Eleanor smiled gently. No jewelry, but deep foundations. Guests raised tin mugs in cheer. No one demanded proof. Here love showed in stacked wood, not papers. A week on, Eleanor stepped out to find Clayton completing the kitchen door. She'd inquired about his project, but he urged patience. In the fading light, she saw it a horseshoe, reshaped and polished, fixed as the handle. "Found it twisted by the field," he explained. "Seemed like junk, but it just required molding." She traced it. "Like certain folks," he agreed. "Damaged items can bear loads if resilient." Wildflowers flourished. Thomas thrived. One golden dusk, Eleanor sat at her desk with a sheet of her father's old blue paper. She wrote, "Dear Pa, you once claimed home is a sensation, not a location. I doubted it then, but now I see. I raised a cabin, dragged timber, formed the roof, braved gales, for me and my son. But it needed a persistent cowboy with twilight eyes and a heart like yours to turn it home-like. We're no longer solitary. Love, your Eleanor." She folded and tucked it in her father's old tin box. Outside, Thomas giggled. His first true laugh. Clayton, mending a fence, glanced up. Eleanor approached, baby in tow, heart overflowing. The breeze bore pine and potential. Spring had dawned, bringing dreams she'd never dared. If you've reached this tale's close, if your chest tightened as Eleanor faced the blizzard solo, if you glimpsed yourself in Clayton's steadfast pledge, "I won't lose you too," then you get it. Love in the Old West wasn't handed out. It was forged from timber and toughened palms, from wakeful nights and quiet hopes, from wounds unspoken until someone lingered to hear. If Eleanor and Clayton's path touched you, if you trust love can outlast rules, grief, and blizzards, then subscribe and join Wild West Love Stories. Each week, another narrative awaits, of souls traversing wastelands, tender holds by fire aglow, folks bold enough to trust despite the odds. We share tales that hush your breath, spark smiles, perhaps draw tears, and if fortunate, renew faith. This is Wild West love stories, where shots may stray but affections always hit true.